Cardinals at 2. Now, the Cardinals won the division in 2015, but Russell Wilson says this is the most talented team he's been a part of since being in Seattle, including his Super Bowl winning team in 2013. So the question, gentlemen, Max, we'll start with you, is who wins the NFC West, the Hawks or the Cards?
The answer is the Seattle Seahawks. And I know that the Cardinals are the in fashion, in vogue pick right now as the #1 best team, and I get it. Bruce Arians done a tremendous job. They have weapons everywhere, both sides of the ball. They looked even last year to be the most well-rounded team
Man, don't
in the
try to
NFL.
hedge your bets. Talk about your Seattle Seahawks since you're so bold.
I'm going to talk about it.
So talk about your Seattle Seahawks. Lead the Cardinals to me.
Defense.
Yep.
Last year. Mm-hmm. Seattle Seahawks second in total defense. Arizona fifth.
Yep.
Oh, David Johnson, everyone's talking about, and they had depth at running back, too. Rushing last year. Seattle Seahawks third. Arizona eighth. And by the way, Rawls is a bad man, Stephen A.
He's
good.
He's good.
Pete Carroll, between him and Bruce Arians, two tremendous coaches. Who are you going to take? Who are you going to take if you have to take one? You're going to take Pete Carroll. Cam Chancellor is not going to miss the first 2 weeks of the season. Both losses last season for Seattle. Make them 2 games better, potentially. Jimmy Graham is going to be integrated into the offense. Remember, they traded Max Unger for him. It hurt the offensive line. They had a year to get over that. They now have what you would think would be an elite, at least pass-catching tight end back in that offense. And then finally, and most importantly, Stephen A., they got the demonstrably better and clearly better quarterback. Russell Wilson is obviously and clearly better than Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer will take those shots down the field. He's a gunslinger. He'll take risks. Russell Wilson will be more effective. He's more conservative with the ball, yes. He's much more mobile. He is the better third down quarterback. He's the guy you'd want with the ball in his hand and the game on the line consistently throughout his career, coming through with huge clutch plays. Compare that to how Carson Palmer fared with the money on the line last year in the playoffs. And even at receiver, where you say John Brown, like that's a clear advantage. In fact, Russell Wilson to Doug Baldwin is probably the most underrated tandem in the NFL. Doug Baldwin is a baller. They don't just, for whatever reason, because Pete Carroll cares, I guess, more about winning games than racking up stats. I'm not saying Bruce Arians is trying to rack up stats, but Baldwin really is not used like the level of talent and ability and performance he's demonstrated, especially over the last couple of years. I think where there's an edge, this goes to Seattle, and I'm comfortable saying Seattle Seahawks better than the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, I'm not going to insult that pick, but what I'm going to tell you is that Arizona is no joke. Carson Palmer wet the bed of the playoffs, 6 turnovers, 4 interceptions. He was god-awful. Even though his thumb was injured, the bottom line is it was a pathetic performance, and it ruined an otherwise tremendous season on his part. I think Arizona's a question mark at the tight end slot because you need somebody to throw the ball to over the middle, which is not to say that you can't do that. The problem is, most importantly, with anything else, I mean, you got Darren Fells, who's got a good tight end, and he could do some things. The problem is Carson Palmer loves to throw the ball deep, and he's going to go anybody in the slot. It's going to be in the slot to Larry Fitzgerald. But John Brown is no joke. Michael Floyd is no joke. They can really ball. And David Johnson, you know how I feel about him. Somebody grabbed him during fantasy football, but we'll talk about that another day. In the end, when you consider the fact that he's a dual threat out of the backfield, running the football and catching it as a good receiver, I think their offense with Bruce Arians, pulling the strings, has an opportunity to be high-powered. Questions on your offensive line, questions at your tight end spot, but I think both of those issues are neutralized by the dual threat that is David Johnson, combined with Larry Fitzgerald being in the slot and having wideouts who are deep threats. So when I look at it from that perspective, with Bruce Arians coaching, and I think Arizona's defense is going to be relatively decent with Calais Campbell and a crew, especially with the Honey Badger being back, with Patrick Patterson and back there with him
and they got
in the secondary,
Jones.
And you got Chandler Jones. I'm sorry, and then they got Kim Dichie. I'm a fan of his. I love Kim Dichie. I loved him more than Joey Bosa. He just had some troubles off the field that hurt him. I look at Seattle and I look at their defense, and I know their defense is elite. It's big time. But look at some of these losses. You got Bruce Irvin gone. You got Mebane gone. You got Russell Okung gone. I mean, I look at those. Those are pivotal losses. I think that Seattle will make the playoffs. I think one could make the argument that they will excel later on in the season. But in terms of the regular season, to answer the direct question as to who's going to win the NFC West, I believe it's going to be Arizona again. I think Seattle will be a wild card, and they may make some noise in the playoffs. But during the regular season, I think that Arizona is gonna squeeze out. They probably get them by just one game, but I think they're going to win the division.
When you sling it around like Carson Palmer, especially down the field, and don't always seem to make judicious decisions with the ball, and no one seems to be better at that, by the way, than Russell Wilson, you're going to get picked. Casey Joyner, the football scientist, wrote about this in his fantasy draft guide. Like, Carson Palmer's picks could go way up any given year. That could happen the way he throws the ball down the field. Unlikely with Russell Wilson, who, by the way, when people talk about, and I've talked about it a lot, Cam Newton in the second half of last year, Tom Brady throughout most of last year, especially through two-thirds of the season, Aaron Rodgers, of course, when he has weapons available. In fact, the best football player on earth over the second half of last season was Russell Wilson. Like, for some reason, the perception of him still hasn't fully caught up to the reality of him, because he was considered a game manager who was mobile. But in fact, even then, he was a really good game manager who was big on third down, which is exactly what you want. And then he took his game to the next level.
But the part that you're missing, Max, is that even though he's better than a game manager, I consider Russell Wilson an all-pro. I consider him to be a tier 1 player. I think he's big time. Here's the problem. Your defense is so elite, you can afford as an offense to be relatively conservative, which at times they appear to be. Now, beast mode being gone, key is going to be Rawls, because if Rawls is not running the football well enough, that's going to put more pressure on Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson will get it done. He will close the deal more often than not. And we know that about him. The flip side is if you're Pete Carroll and those boys, because you don't want to sit up there and put Russell Wilson in any kind of precarious position, you'll lean on a defense, which will make your offense relatively methodical and conservative. And as a result, it might cost you a couple of games during the regular season. During the playoffs, you'll be able to shine. But during the regular season, Bruce Arians is going to let it fly. And they're going to go for it, more so than Seattle, which is why I give them the edge in the regular season.
Don't forget those first 2 weeks, close games that they lost without Cam Chancellor. That didn't happen in this year.
Well, they struggled because they were missing a couple.
Yeah, but you also got to remember, it wasn't just because Cam Chancellor was gone. Even when they came back, there was a couple of games they lost. You're talking about chemistry, continuity, because people want new contracts, because everybody wants to shine. Sometimes you got locker room issues in Seattle.
You give me,
they get it together,
among comparable teams, you give me the team with the better coach and better quarterback, Seattle.
Both teams are so stacked, but that Panthers game is still in my mind when
it was bad, but that was
in the
playoffs, not regular season.
Of course. The Seahawks and Cardinals are tied for 8-1 odds to win it all, and the Patriots are first with 7-1 odds. When we come back, the King is coming off the Caps' first championship in franchise history, but why is LeBron James already thinking about ownership? Don't miss that discussion.